All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. Today we are going to continue analyzing the platform of our good friend Andrew Yang and all of his ideas for 2020. We actually have three of what we think are some of his best ideas because they're so short and they're so sweet. So today's video is actually going to be the top three things that we've liked about the first third of Andrew Yang's now 72 different policy proposals. So let's dive right in here. The first thing, well, actually, I'll tell you exactly what all three of them are. First one is daylight savings time. Hallelujah. Finally, somebody has taken this bull by the horns and, you know, not just Arizona. Second is addressing the redlining or the bumping of airlines. That has become a pretty big problem and also is very similar to concerts being oversold. And we have a pretty specific, well-researched incident there. And then the third thing is the American Mall Act. Malls are closing left and right. The retail working class is getting laid off in places something to the tune of 25 to 30% very quickly. And there's ways we can recycle the usage of these buildings so the closing of a mall doesn't have to mean that everybody goes unemployed. So let's jump right in. First and foremost, Cody, daylight savings time. What does Andrew Yang propose?
Andrew Yang and daylight savings time is actually pretty simple, right? There's not a whole lot to it. It's really what everyone, well, what myself wants. I can speak for myself.
Yeah.
As president, I will work with Congress to pass the Sunshine Protection Act at a national level. Thanks for that name, Florida. Sunshine Protection Act basically just makes daylight saving times permanent. We will no longer be, falling back and springing forward, so to speak. Just some really quick things, just noted in his policy right here. While mornings are darker, evenings are lighter for longer. This leads to increased exercise and outdoor activity. Lower crime as the amount of people are out in darkness decreases. Increased economic activity as people are more likely to shop at night when it's still light out, and fewer traffic accidents as it's easier to drive in sunlight. Additionally, removing the transition between the different times would decrease traffic accidents further, with people being tired on the road, alleviate the increase in heart attacks seen during the time change, which is bizarre to think about, but I'm sure real, and prevent us from needing to reset our clocks, a minor annoyance, but I love a presidential candidate mentioning that, and then prevent us from being late to work, again, exceedingly early depending on the season. That's really funny as well.
Okay, so we interviewed Philip K. Howard on our terrestrial radio show, and he had a hilarious book called The Rule of No One, I think it was called.
Yeah, that's one.
And he talked about how, just like Ronald Reagan said, the closest thing to eternal life that we've ever found in the United States of America is a government bureaucracy. And this idea that was good when it was started, from what I understand, in the 30s or the 20s, it was like post-World War I, okay, was to decrease energy utilization and also aid certain industries in their production. So it was a good idea back then, but it is just stuck on the books and in our society until the modern day. And it is actually costing us lives. I mean, there was a study done, okay, by the University of Colorado asking, does daylight savings time cause auto accidents? And there's actually a ton of data. Austin C. Smith, who authored this study, okay, this actually comes from a U.S. News and World Report, their car section. The Austin C. Smith, who authored this study, contends that there are 302 traffic fatalities attributable to daylight savings time over the 10-year sample period because truckers are tired after having lost that 1 hour of sleep. And we already know that truckers are under a lot of pressure in order to make all of their deadlines. Some of them resort to substance abuse. Some of them resort to heavy amounts of caffeine. And many states have rules, such as here in California, you have to prove that you were off the road sleeping for a certain amount of time. But anyway, in that change of daylight savings time over a 10-year period, he found 302 traffic fatalities that were directly attributable to this old idea that really just isn't necessary anymore. With the advent of air conditioning, most of these energy savings are awash, and data from Canada's Manitoba Public Insurance in 2014 showed 20% increases in crashes on the Monday following the start of daylight savings time. Now that's in Canada, but most North American statistics are the same. And some studies suggest that transitioning to year-round daylight savings time would create a small but, quote, significant reduction in pedestrian and motor vehicle occupant fatalities. So a simple fix that can be done, and Andrew Yang's the only one taking this bull by the horns. Here's the only question I have for you, Cody. I just thought up something. Can a president just executive order away daylight savings time, or does this have to be an act of Congress? I don't want to be a parliamentarian.
Well, he refers to it on his platform as working with Congress to pass a specific act, the Sunshine Protection Act. So, yeah, I don't think you can executive order it. I mean, to be frank, it's one of those things where
we just like that he's talking about it.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things, especially now. We're filming this right now in late March, so very recently we did have this turnover, and I'll admit, I was kind of tired and groggy for a few weeks here, and I definitely would agree that, hey, let's get rid of it. We don't need it. Didn't help me any. My life is not better at all because it's daylight actually, I prefer the daylight an hour longer. My life wasn't any better when it got darker an hour early. I mean, that did nothing for me. I really do think this is a good change, and I do like citing the fact that there are people that do get in increased auto accidents because they're tired. I mean, you're not used to waking up that time.
Yeah. So in our last 4 minutes here, we're going to tackle the last two ideas that I love on Yang2020.com, preventing airlines from removing customers. Now, the number has significantly decreased over the past couple of decades as the negative publicity has increased. But we all know that airlines overbook purposefully all of their flights in order to try and compensate for the amount of no-shows that show up. However, when that doesn't work, it's very, very problematic. I experienced here in Los Angeles in my youth in the 90s when Magic Mountain oversold a Snoop Dogg concert with some other rappers and hip-hop artists thinking, oh, well, we have to overbook most of our concerts because some people don't show up. Not realizing that all of Snoop Dogg's fans and the hip-hop artists were showing up because they wanted to see him, and that actually caused a riot. The cops had to come in, and we had to show our ID just to get off the freeway on-ramp in order to make it back to our houses. And airlines, most recently, there's been heartbreaking cases where a man who was a doctor was randomly selected for removal from an overbooked flight because if nobody volunteers to get off, with the promise of some minor pay, some stipend, or an overnight hotel, if no one volunteers, they have to actually pick by random someone. And the doctor said, I have to get home to patients. But the police are saying, nope, sorry, we're following protocol. And they literally had to thump him and drag him out of the airplane by force under duress because he committed the crime of being a good citizen who paid for his flight, went through security, and calmly boarded an airplane. This is crazy, and I'm not a huge fan of governmental regulation. I definitely wouldn't want a bureaucracy formed about this, but this problem must be addressed. Where do I go wrong, Cody?
No, I mean, I agree, man. I've flown not a ton of my life, but I've flown before. I've never personally ran into this, but here's a study going back to, I think, 2016, or from 2017 article saying last year, 2016, 434,425 passengers gave up their seats, almost 500,000 people. And that's just in the nation's 12 largest airlines. I'm willing to assume you probably get to 500,000 when you account for everything. Now, the thing is, they said only 40% were involuntarily bumped, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Okay. However, you always have to wonder with stuff like this. It kind of sucks to say, but the average person, if you say, hey, we'll give you a free night in the hotel and drinks on us tonight, they'll take it, fair or not, whether they're getting hosed or not.
Yeah, but
they'll take
doctor that says, I'd love to take the free vacation.
Well, this doctor
I
also
took those once. I mean, I spent a night once in San Francisco at a decent hotel and had free breakfast and then went to the 10 o'clock flight the next morning instead of the 7 o'clock flight the evening before, and it didn't hurt me and my schedule. Yeah, because I was a college student who was on vacation. Who cares? However, this doctor, when he says, no, I can't go home. I don't care if you want to give me $500. I have patience. You can't drag the guy out under duress. And then also, if you make a rule that he needs to be randomly selected and he's a random selectee, well, now we've got an infrastructural problem.
Well, let's get really quickly. I want to get to what Andrew Yang actually proposed about this.
Okay, what did he propose?
Because we can argue if it's an issue or not. Yeah. But what I like, and some people, I've already heard some criticism saying they don't like the idea of this. However, direct the FAA to force airlines to have customer auctions for when they are giving their seats up. For example, they can't just say, hey, you have to leave. It's all right, $500 in free drinks, $500 in a room and free drinks, $800, and then eventually they kind of have to bribe people off the plane, which it's very pro-consumer. I always like pro-consumer. And then also, this I think is more of the interesting bit to it. Direct the FAA to investigate any airline that forcibly removes a customer for any reason other than the customer is posing a threat to other customers. Idea being, which I like, is, yeah, look, this stuff's going to happen. You're going to oversell. People are going to have to be removed.
Yeah.
But if these airlines know that the FAA is looking into it, and if you're removing people by force or, coaxing them off all the time. They can step in and say, hey, look, this is not fair practice.
I don't like the idea of something that might drive up the cost too much, but I would like to see what the CBO thinks about Andrew Yang's idea, and then I'd be able to analyze it. Now, the last thing really fast, see if we can do this in 1 minute.
Close enough.
I love this idea. I love that somebody's thinking about the changing in the economy, and Andrew Yang calls it the American Mall Act. Okay, and all of us have heard from our parents, hey, let's go to the mall. And even when I was a kid, that was what you did when you went to the mall, because believe it or not, Cody, I remember a world pre-internet. But the truth is, we don't need to go to the mall to buy a lot of items that now we just buy on Amazon. Okay, we don't need to go to the mall for a lot of items that are just now purchased online. So malls are changing, and quickly the retail clerk job is going the way of the dodo bird. And this is a change in the economy that has happened very, very rapidly and is going to continue to happen very rapidly. And we've all noticed that I think the stat is that about 30% of American malls are going to be closed within the next decade. So that's going to be a hit to our economy. Yes, there will be other jobs created elsewhere, but we will have a lot of empty infrastructure, and people that study social science knows that that can lead to crime, that can lead to a loss of morale inside of a community. And there's lots of places that need good areas. We could convert these malls into education centers, into community centers. When I was working with the Single Mothers Outreach Program, they needed a place to have their gala in which they raise all kinds of money to help out the single mothers. And I believe that the market should dictate a lot of what and how, what use and how space is used. But I really do think that in times of rapid change, think tanks seriously addressing this, maybe even think tanks that have some money put at them from government use, would be very, very useful to our economy. And another one of Andrew Yang's ideas that we're going to analyze in the next video is actually relocating federal facilities from the Washington, D.C. area that were originally put there back when communication was difficult and all of the government bureaucracies had to be centralized. There's no reason we couldn't have a great DEA facility that was in a failing mall in Tennessee. There's no reason that the IRS couldn't open up their office instead of, south of K Street in Washington, D.C. in the wing of a mall that just closed in Valencia, California. So I think this is a really good idea. Is there anything I missed?
Well, I just really quickly want to read over what he's actually proposing on his website is to sponsor the American Mall Act, which would secure a $6 billion fund to help struggling malls attract businesses, schools, organizations, and entrepreneurs to find new uses for the buildings and commercial space. And I was just kind of rotating them through early. I'll throw them back up here on the screen. I mean, it honestly kind of breaks my heart looking at some of these photos of, this looks like our old local mall when I was a kid. I used to go all the time, the same glass ceilings and all that stuff. And it's just kind of heartbreaking to think that, I remember going to malls, man. I was little, but I remember going to malls and loving going to malls. And I do definitely see how that has a bigger impact on the morale of a community than you might think. When what used to be the social hub, it's actually a really interesting movie I like called True Stories, made by the guy from Talking Heads, David Byrne, and he has a monologue where he explains how the mall has become like the town square for the modern person. This is 1980s, and there's a lot of people that are still alive who knew when the mall was a town square and now see it as a barren desert.
And here's some data for you that I forgot to mention. Nothing lowers the morale of a community and the pride that the people in a community take in their community in terms of cleanliness and public services and so on and so forth than a broken glass window. Not graffiti, not mismatch roses to the grass in the front yard, none of that other than a broken window. And also, there's been multiple social science studies that have showed the happiness of a community is oftentimes dependent upon what are called the impromptu or unplanned interactions in the community. And that means that suburbanites, for example, that get into their car in the morning in their private garage and then drive to their private work and then see the same people at work before driving to their private hub and before coming home, don't have a lot of impromptu reactions with other fellow citizens like you have in the mall when you bump into people at the mall and you make new friends at the mall, or you meet a person at one of the stores. So those interpersonal face-to-face relationships that are impromptu are oftentimes what help forge relationships in a community and make us feel like a member of the community. So I see the American Mall Act addressing this. The only thing I would say, like George Herbert Walker Bush did, was no new taxes, Andrew Yang. You got to show me that you can do this without any new taxes. Other than that, I really, really like the idea that he's the only one talking about this.
Well, there will be the VAT. The value-added tax is definitely part of his platform, and if he is elected, it would be implemented. Or he'd attempt to implement it. That'd be the goal.
Okay.
Which is the value-added tax for some of it.
We're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode. This is Problem Solver Politics.